The HOA president, Karen Whitmore, standing on my dock with her designer heels sinking into wet wood, screaming that I can't charge her $250 to swim in her lake. Behind her, 20 confused neighbors clutch their wallets like I've just announced a luxury tax on entitlement. My phone's already recording because I know this meltdown will be pure internet gold. Every time she shouts, the echo bounces off the water like karma laughing back. 6 months earlier, this woman tried to erase my family from the shoreline we'd cared for since my grandfather's time. She built fences, filed complaints, called me unsuitable for the neighborhood. So yeah, watching her rage in front of the same lake she tried to steal feels like justice served cold and clear as mountain water. But the story didn't start here. It started the morning I realized paradise can be paved over by people who think rules are only for others. My name's Derek Holloway, and before all this, life was simple. I'd inherited a small 2-bedroom cabin tucked among pines in Pine Ridge, Colorado, a patch of land where the smell of coffee and wood smoke blended into peace itself. My family had been here since the 60s. Grandpa Joe built the dock plank by plank, teaching me that hard work keeps you honest and nature keeps you sane. Every morning before sunrise, I'd walk the gravel path down to the lake, boots crunching, thermos in hand, mist lifting like slow breath over the water. The first plunge always shocked the sleep out of me, that perfect mix of pain and clarity. I'd float there, watching light crawl over the ridgeline, feeling lucky to have a place untouched by the chaos of the world. That was before the developers came. Before Willowbrook Estates appeared on billboards, promising exclusive mountain luxury living. I watched trucks roll in, carving the meadow where elk used to graze. Within months, identical mansions sprouted like mushrooms after rain. Stucco, tile roofs, manicured lawns, and homeowners who thought wilderness came with Wi-Fi and rules about fence colors. The lake suddenly had a new audience. People who believed owning property near it meant owning the view, the air, maybe even the fish. I kept my head down, figuring they'd get bored once winter hit. I was wrong. The first time I met Karen Whitmore, she appeared on my dock like she'd been summoned by the sound of non-compliance. Mid-40s, platinum hair that could deflect sunlight, pearl earrings big enough to fund a small rescue shelter. She smiled like she was auditioning for a toothpaste commercial. "You must be Derek," she said, the way someone might greet a raccoon raiding their trash. "I'm the president of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. We need to talk about liability concerns." Her tone wrapped the word liability in warning tape. I told her the dock was on family property and that we'd been using the lake for decades with permission from the owner, Ezra Kowalski. She nodded politely, the kind of nod that really means we'll see about that, and left with a smile so tight it could cut glass. A week later, I woke up to hammering. Down by the path, workers in safety vests were sinking metal posts into fresh concrete. By evening, a chain-link fence stretched across the trail my grandfather had cleared with his own hands. Bright red no trespassing signs gleamed like taunts. My stomach dropped. I followed the fence line until I found a gate locked with new padlocks. On the other side stood Karen, clipboard in hand, supervising like a queen inspecting her moat. "You can't block public access," I called out. She turned, perfect smile still in place. "This isn't public, Mr. Holloway. The HOA is protecting community assets. We can't have strangers creating liability." Strangers? I'd lived here longer than her entire subdivision had existed, I should have yelled. Instead, I took a photo, then another. 20 years as an electrician teaches you one thing: never fight emotion with emotion. Document first, react later. I walked back to the cabin, each step heavier than the last, anger buzzing under my skin like a live wire. That night, I pulled out old papers Grandpa Joe had kept, survey maps, hand-drawn notes, receipts from the 1960s, when he'd maintained the dock for Ezra's father. Proof maybe that we had history here deeper than any HOA clause. The next morning I drove to the county records office. The place smelled like dust and bureaucratic exhaustion. After hours flipping through maps that looked older than the moon landing, I found what I needed. The lake was still owned by Ezra Kowalski, a 70-something recluse who lived on the far side. The HOA didn't own an inch of it. Not the shoreline, not the water, nothing. I grinned for the first time that week. Then I noticed another document, a recent offer filed by Willowbrook Estates HOA to purchase exclusive recreational rights. The buyer's signature? Karen Whitmore. My pulse jumped. She wasn't just blocking access. She was trying to buy the lake out from under everyone who'd ever used it. I drove straight to Ezra's place, a weathered cabin half hidden by evergreens. He opened the door before I knocked, lean and sharp-eyed despite the oxygen tank beside him. "You're Joe's grandson," he said, studying the calluses on my hands. "You've got his grip." We sat on his porch, the air thick with pine and distant thunder. He told me Karen had offered him $50,000 for exclusive lake rights. "She says it'll make the community safer," he said with a dry chuckle. Told her I'd think about it, but something in her eyes didn't sit right. He coughed hard, then smiled through it. "Truth is, my medical bills are stacking up. Can't pay them forever." Something twisted in my chest. 50,000 wouldn't cover half his treatment, but it might tempt him if desperation won. I promised I'd look into other options. He waved me off, saying, "Don't get yourself tangled in this mess, son." Too late for that. The fence was already in my yard. Over the next week, harassment began slow. Anonymous HOA letters about noise complaints and unsightly maintenance tools on my porch. Then came phone calls, hang-ups at all hours, and one morning my mailbox stuffed with pamphlets about proper community standards. Every petty tactic aimed to make me leave. Instead, it lit a fire. I filed a complaint with the county about the fence crossing public easement. 2 days later, inspectors arrived, measuring tape in hand. When they confirmed the fence extended 3 feet into restricted land, they ordered immediate removal. Watching Karen argue with the officer was like watching a soap opera villain realize the cameras are still rolling. Her voice climbed octaves. "This is harassment. These people don't belong here," she yelled, pointing at me as if summoning lightning. The officer handed her a citation. I smiled politely and said, "Guess rules are for everyone after all." That was the first small victory, but it didn't cool her rage. It fed it. HOA notices doubled. Someone reported my truck as an abandoned commercial vehicle. Then came rumors that I was running illegal wiring jobs. Word travels fast in small towns. Karen made sure of it. Still, every night I'd stand on the dock, watching the moon ripple on the lake and thinking of Grandpa Joe's words, "The lake gives peace to those who respect it, and mirrors the souls of those who don't." I wasn't going to let arrogance steal that peace. I started gathering allies. The first was Bobby, the young security guard Karen hired to patrol the lake path. I found him one evening eating pie at Murphy's Diner, looking like guilt personified. "She's got me taking photos of you," he admitted quietly. "Every time you step near the water." He glanced around before adding, "She offered me a bonus if I catch you breaking rules." I told him not to worry, just keep the photos coming. They'd help me later. We shook hands like two soldiers on opposite sides, realizing who the real enemy was. The second ally came from an unexpected place. Margaret Luca, a 68-year-old retired librarian who'd lived in Willowbrook since it broke ground. She knocked on my door, carrying cookies and a stack of HOA newsletters. "You're fighting the dragon, dear," she said. "So you'll need a map of its cave. Over coffee." She told me everything. Karen's obsession with property values, the debt from her husband's failed restaurant, the promises she made to homeowners about exclusive lake amenities. Margaret's eyes sparkled. "She's desperate, and desperate people make mistakes." I liked Margaret immediately. By now, the HOA war was no longer quiet. Karen filed new noise complaints, this time claiming my generator violated decibel limits. I countered by inviting the inspector over. He left laughing, saying I was quieter than her leaf blowers. Small wins one by one. Each one chipped away at her perfect facade. The more she tried to intimidate, the calmer I became. Because patience, like electricity, builds power before release. Then, just when I thought things might settle, fate handed me something I never expected. Ezra called one evening, voice weak but excited. "You'd better come over, son. Found something in my daddy's old files that might interest you." I drove through twilight, headlights cutting through pine shadows. On his kitchen table sat a dusty manila envelope stuffed with yellowed papers. Inside were mineral lease documents from 1958, agreements with a long-defunct company to explore natural gas deposits under the lake. The lease had expired decades ago, meaning full rights reverted to Ezra. My mind raced. If those reports were accurate, the lake wasn't just water. It was wealth waiting underground, enough to save Ezra's home, maybe even change both our lives. He looked at me unsure. "I don't understand half these words," he said. "All I know is your granddad helped my daddy build that dock. Feels wrong selling any of it to her. I promised him I'd figure it out." For the first time in months, hope replaced frustration. Maybe the best revenge wasn't shouting or lawsuits. Maybe it was outsmarting her entirely. That night, I stood on the dock again. The moon's reflection shimmered like silver secrets just below the surface. Somewhere out there, beneath that calm water, lay the key to everything. Peace, justice, and maybe the sweetest payback ever conceived. Karen thought she'd won because she built a fence. She had no idea I was about to buy the ground and the lake it stood on. By the time morning light hit the ridge, I already had coffee, a notebook, and a plan. Ezra's documents sat spread across my kitchen table like treasure maps. Geological survey numbers, drilling coordinates, royalties that had once been pocket change but could now be gold. I'd seen men wire entire hospitals for less money than this lake might hide beneath its surface. But if I moved too soon, Karen would smell it. People like her always did. So I decided to do what electricians do best, trace every wire before flipping the breaker. The first call went to my friend Tom Rodriguez, small-town lawyer and part-time fishing buddy. When I explained the situation, he whistled through his teeth. "So you're telling me the HOA tyrant tried to buy a lake she doesn't own, and you might be sitting on natural gas?" I told him exactly that. He laughed. "All right, buddy. Give me a few days to confirm these rights. And whatever you do, keep your mouth shut around Whitmore." Keeping quiet wasn't easy. Karen had ramped up her campaign from petty to pathological. New letters showed up accusing me of everything from improper garbage disposal to visually inconsistent window coverings. One evening, a county truck pulled into my drive. Someone had filed a complaint about unlicensed electrical work. The inspector recognized me, shook his head, and said, "She's back at it, huh?" He looked over my wiring, wrote "compliant" in big block letters, and muttered, "This woman's making more paperwork than a storm makes branches." Each attempt backfired, but every false report chipped at my time and nerves. When I'd start to lose patience, I'd head over to Ezra's. His stories grounded me. Tales of winters where ice cracked like gunfire, summers where you could see trout flash silver beneath the moon. He'd wheeze between sentences, smile and say, "It's funny, isn't it? Folks move out here for peace and quiet, then spend all their time creating noise." One afternoon, while fixing his sagging porch steps, I noticed how pale he looked. He admitted the chemo was draining him, bills piling faster than firewood. "If I don't figure something out soon," he said, "the bank will take this place." That hit me harder than any insult Karen had thrown. He wasn't greedy. He was drowning. And the one person offering a rope was tying knots into it. I spent nights researching mineral rights, cross-referencing property laws with black coffee and sheer stubbornness. The more I read, the clearer it became. If Ezra sold even partial rights, he could clear his debt and keep ownership. If we created a limited liability company, we could protect him from lawsuits and, most importantly, from Karen's reach. When I told Tom, he nodded. Smart. Turned defense into offense. Margaret stopped by often, pretending to deliver muffins, but really delivering intel. "She's holding emergency HOA meetings twice a week," she said one night. "Telling residents lake access is coming any day now. Promising home values will rise 20%. Margaret grinned over her coffee. "She's selling a dream she doesn't own." When that bubble pops, it's going to be glorious. We spent evenings like conspirators in an old spy movie. Me, Margaret, and Tom, passing paperwork across the table while the smell of pine smoke filled the air. The plan grew solid. We'd secure financing using Ezra's mineral rights as collateral, purchase the lake outright, and then develop a small, eco-friendly recreation business, legal, sustainable, and out of her reach. If she wanted control, she'd have to buy a ticket like everyone else. Of course, she sensed something brewing. Control freaks can smell independence the way sharks smell blood. One morning, I found Bobby waiting by the dock, eyes darting like he'd been followed. "She told me to record you talking to Mr. Kowalski," he said quietly. "She thinks you're manipulating him." He handed me a thumb drive. Every text she sent me, every photo she demanded. I can't work for her anymore. I thanked him, slipped the drive into my pocket, and told him he'd just done the right thing. That night, Margaret and I scrolled through Karen's messages on my laptop, paragraphs of venom wrapped in polite punctuation. "Get evidence of misconduct. Focus on his financial troubles. We'll prove he's taking advantage of a senior citizen." Margaret shook her head. "She's building her own gallows." 2 days later, I took the drive to Tom. "This," he said, holding it up, "is enough to bury her if she pushes further." But I didn't want a burial. I wanted protection. We used the material only to draft cease and desist letters, quiet warnings, with just enough legal weight to make her think twice. For about a week, things went strangely quiet. The fence came down under county order. The path reopened. Neighbors started waving again, tentative, as if realizing the villain in this story might not be me. Then, just as I dared to breathe, Karen made her next move. A bright envelope arrived, certified mail, HOA letterhead. Inside was a notice of pending litigation. According to her, I had illegally interfered with community land acquisition. I laughed so hard I spilled coffee. She'd actually accused me of obstructing a purchase that wasn't even legal. Tom called it the legal equivalent of a toddler's tantrum. We filed a counter notice demanding proof of claim. She had none. Still, the letter served its purpose: intimidation. That night I drove to Ezra's with barbecue from Murphy's Diner. He looked stronger, spirits lifted by the company and a good meal. I spread out new paperwork on his kitchen table. "Here's how this works," I said. "We form Pine Ridge Lake Partners LLC. You keep 60%, I hold 40%. We lease the mineral rights to a legitimate company, secure funding, and buy the lake. Clean, legal, permanent." He studied the papers for a long time, then grinned. "Your granddad would be proud, son. You're fighting smart. We spent hours filling out forms, signing what needed signatures, laughing at how much bureaucracy it took to protect what used to be settled by a handshake. When I left that night, the stars were out thick and bright. The kind of sky that makes you believe maybe justice is written somewhere up there in constellations. The next morning, Karen stormed down my driveway in her spotless SUV. Stopping so abruptly, gravel sprayed my boots. She stepped out, all perfume and posture. "We need to have a civilized discussion," she announced, like she was calling a board meeting. I crossed my arms. "About what?" "The fence you lost or the lake you don't own." Her smile tightened. "About your interactions with Mr. Kowalski. We're concerned he's being exploited." "Funny," I said. "He told me the same about you." Color drained from her face. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Be careful, Derek. You're playing in deep water." "Good thing I know how to swim," I said, and walked away. After that, she unleashed the storm. Inspectors, noise citations, even a health and safety report about unsecured construction materials that turned out to be my fishing rods. But each attack left a trail. Names, dates, case numbers, and Tom filed them all neatly into a growing folder labeled simply evidence. Meanwhile, the bank approved our loan. Ezra signed the last of the documents with shaky hands, whispering, "Feels like closing a circle." We scheduled the purchase for Friday afternoon. Margaret baked a pie for good luck, and Bobby texted that Karen was too busy bragging about her upcoming exclusive lake deal to notice what we were doing. Thursday evening, I sat on my porch watching the sunset burn orange over the water. For the first time in months, the lake looked peaceful again. I thought of Grandpa Joe, of every quiet morning swim, of Ezra coughing into his sleeve but smiling anyway. Tomorrow we'd make it official. By the time Karen realized, she'd be the one outside the fence. Sleep didn't come easy. My phone buzzed near midnight, Tom's name flashing. His voice was tight. "She's filed an emergency injunction. Claims Ezra's mentally unfit to sign contracts. Says you're manipulating him." I stared at the ceiling, rage and disbelief mixing in my chest. "She never quits, does she?" "No," Tom said, "but neither do we. Meet me at the title office first thing. I've got a surprise for her." At dawn, I drove through fog thick enough to taste, every mile feeling like a countdown. Ezra sat waiting, coat buttoned, papers in hand, eyes clear despite the dark circles. "You ready to finish this?" I asked. He nodded. "We've been ready since the day she called me simple." When we arrived, Karen was already there with a lawyer in a suit, sharp enough to cut glass. She pretended surprise, voice dripping with fake warmth. "Oh, Derek, I didn't expect you here. We're just ensuring Mr. Kowalski's interests are protected." Ezra rolled his eyes. "By stealing them, you mean?" The room went quiet. A lawyer cleared his throat and began reading legal jargon about diminished capacity. Tom waited patiently, then introduced a woman with a briefcase and the calm authority of someone used to being underestimated. "Dr. Mitchell," he said, "licensed cognitive specialist. She evaluated Mr. Kowalski yesterday." Karen blinked. "That's impossible," Dr. Mitchell smiled. "Not at all. He passed every test. Excellent memory, strong reasoning. There's no question of competence." The air left the room like a popped balloon. Karen's lawyer stammered something about procedural review, but Tom cut him off. "Unless you have real evidence, this injunction is void. Now shall we proceed with the sale?" Ezra signed each page slowly, carefully, the pen trembling but steady enough to make every stroke count. When the final signature dried, I felt something unclench inside me that had been tight for months. Karen watched in stunned silence, her dream dissolving in real time. She tried one last attack. "This is fraud. I'll have you arrested for exploiting an old man." Tom didn't even blink. "You mean the same old man you offered $85,000 in cash if his nephew convinced him to sign fake papers?" He played an audio clip on his phone, the recording Bobby had saved. Karen's voice filled the room, crystal clear. "Just get him to sign these, and there's 10 grand in it for you." The color drained from her face again. Her lawyer quietly packed his briefcase. At exactly 3:47 p.m., the title officer stamped the final deed. Pine Ridge Lake Partners, official owner of the lake and surrounding easement. Ezra exhaled. "Guess you'll have to pay admission now." We left the office into crisp mountain air that felt lighter than it had in months. I looked back through the glass door just long enough to see Karen slump into a chair, eyes wide with disbelief. For the first time since this nightmare began, the score read, "Working Man 1, HOA 0." As we drove toward the water, the late afternoon sun caught the lake like molten gold. It wasn't just property anymore. It was freedom. Freedom from her, from pettiness, from every gate ever slammed in someone's face because they didn't fit a neighborhood mold. Tomorrow we'd post the signs, file the permits, and open the new chapter, one where Karen paid to swim. By sunrise, the lake belonged to us, officially, legally, permanently. The documents sat on my kitchen table under my coffee mug, still warm from the printer ink. Outside, the water looked the same as always, quiet, steady, reflecting the pink wash of dawn. But it felt different. It felt like victory. After months of being treated like a trespasser on my own history, I finally had the papers to prove I wasn't going anywhere. Ezra showed up mid-morning, wrapped in his old flannel, walking slower than before, but smiling wider. "Never thought I'd live to see the day," he said, eyes on the lake. "You did it, son," I corrected him. We did. We stood there in silence, listening to loons echo across the valley. For the first time in months, the only noise was nature itself. We put up the new sign that afternoon. Polished wood, clean lettering, private property, Pine Ridge Lake Partners, LLC. Day use permits required. $250 special events. It wasn't about greed. It was about respect. People never valued what they didn't pay for. If they wanted access, they could contribute to keeping the lake pristine, simple, fair. The irony, though, was delicious. By evening, word spread faster than wildfire. Margaret called, laughing so hard she could barely speak. "Karen just found out," she wheezed. "She's telling everyone you tricked a dying man into selling his soul." I told her to get her phone ready. Something told me this drama wasn't over. I was right. Saturday morning, the peace shattered. A caravan of SUVs rolled up the gravel road like an invading army. 23 Willowbrook residents poured out. Sun hats, coolers, folding chairs, the works. And at the front, naturally, was Karen. She wore oversized sunglasses, a silk scarf, and an expression that could sour milk. "Ignore those signs," she barked. "This lake belongs to Willowbrook. We have rights." I stepped out of my cabin with my phone recording. "Good morning, folks," I said calmly. "You're welcome to stay. Day permits are $50 per person. Special events are $250 flat." Karen's sunglasses flashed. "You can't charge us. That's extortion." "Actually," I said, holding up the deed, "it's private property. See this logo? Pine Ridge Lake Partners, LLC. That's us." Her jaw dropped. You can't just buy a lake." "Tell that to the county records," I said. They processed it yesterday. For a moment, nobody moved. Then a few of her followers started whispering, pulling out their phones to check the assessor's site. One by one, realization spread like a cold wind. "He's not kidding," someone muttered. "It's real." Karen doubled down. "Everyone set up your chairs. We'll see if he's brave enough to call the cops on his own neighbors." I shrugged and dialed anyway. "Sheriff's Department?" "Yeah, we've got trespassers on private property. No weapons, just an HOA meeting that got lost." Her face went red. "You smug little—" "Careful," I interrupted, pointing at the camera. "It's live." Margaret appeared right on cue, walking down the path with her thermos of coffee like an angel of chaos. "Morning, Karen," she said sweetly. "Lovely day for a meltdown, isn't it?" Karen glared. "You're siding with him?" "I'm siding with the law," Margaret said. "And the facts. You tried to cheat Mr. Kowalski out of millions in mineral rights. Now you're trespassing. Might want to rethink that leadership position. That word, millions, spread through the crowd like electricity." Phones came up again, fingers typing furiously. People started backing away, murmuring. Karen's loyal army was dissolving faster than ice in August. Right then, a white Jeep pulled up, and out stepped Deputy Martinez, the same officer who dealt with the fence months ago. He took one look at the scene and sighed. "Afternoon, folks. Same issue?" I handed him the paperwork. Property deed, permit system signage. "Everything's legal." He scanned it, nodded, then turned to the crowd. "All right, everyone without a permit needs to leave. This is private property." Karen marched toward him like she was about to file a lawsuit right there in the dirt. "You can't let him get away with this. It's a community lake." The deputy's tone was calm but firm. "Ma'am, it was never a community lake. Your HOA never owned it. And right now, you're trespassing." Her voice cracked. "This is harassment." "Then you'll love what happens if you refuse to leave," he said, tipping his hat. The crowd began gathering their things in awkward silence. Folding chairs snapped shut, sunscreen bottles went back into totes, and Karen's perfect rebellion evaporated. But she couldn't let go without one last explosion. She snatched off her sunglasses, eyes wild. "This isn't over. You'll regret this, Derek. You'll regret embarrassing me." "Ma'am," I said, smiling, "I think you're doing that all by yourself." A ripple of laughter rolled through the onlookers. Her face turned crimson. She spun toward the deputy. "Arrest him!" "This is extortion." He just shrugged. "Private owners can set any access fees they want. Maybe next time, get the paperwork before building fences." She screamed something unintelligible, stomped to her golf cart, and slammed the accelerator so hard gravel flew like fireworks. "That'll be $50 for the parking permit." I called after her. She didn't answer, but I swear the deputy was hiding a grin. Margaret sipped her coffee. "Well," she said, "that was more entertaining than cable." A few hours later, the local reporter, Jessica Martinez, showed up. She'd heard about the Great Lake Showdown and wanted the full story. I gave her the facts, nothing more. But when she asked for a photo, I couldn't resist. Me, standing by the sign, the lake glowing behind me. That image ended up on the Pine Ridge Gazette's front page under the headline, "Local Electrician Outsmarts HOA. Buys Entire Lake After Months of Harassment." Within days, it spread online. Social media did what social media does. Someone posted the video of Karen screaming at the deputy. It went viral overnight. The internet crowned her HOA Karen, and memes multiplied like wildfire. 3 weeks later, I heard she'd been voted out as HOA president after a special meeting called by, of all people, Margaret. Apparently, even her former allies had seen enough. Her family sold their house for a loss and moved to Denver, where I'm sure she's complaining about parking garages instead of lakes. Meanwhile, Pine Ridge Lake Partners started operating exactly as planned. We set up a simple permit system, $50 a day for visitors, with all proceeds funding maintenance and conservation. Ezra's cut paid off every medical bill he had. When the first royalty check from the mineral rights came in, his hands shook as he opened it. "I never thought a lake could save a man's life," he said. "Guess I was wrong. By spring, the lake looked better than ever. We cleared trash, rebuilt the dock, and partnered with state wildlife services to restore wetlands. Word spread that we were running a conservation through community project, and for once, the words private property meant preservation, not exclusion. Even the county awarded us a small environmental grant. Sometimes at sunset, I'd sit on the dock and watch families fish along the permitted shoreline. Kids laughing, dogs splashing, adults saying thank you on their way out. The same people who once treated me like an outsider were now paying customers, and strangely enough, friends. One afternoon, Margaret brought lemonade and a stack of mail. "You made the paper again," she said. The headline read, "From Feud to Foundation, Pine Ridge Lake sets example for responsible ownership." Underneath was a photo of Ezra teaching kids to cast fishing lines. The sight of him alive, healthy, smiling, it was better than any paycheck. By summer, the story had settled into local legend. The guy who bought a lake just to make the HOA pay to swim. People still chuckle when they tell it at diners or hardware stores. But for me, it's never been about revenge anymore. It's about peace. Real earned quiet peace. Ezra's doing better now. The treatments worked. He walks with a cane, but still insists on splitting firewood himself. Sometimes we sit by the fire pit he and my granddad built 60 years ago, talking about everything and nothing. "Funny thing," he said one night, "your granddad always said this lake shows people's true selves." Looks like he was right. I asked him what he meant. He pointed across the water. "Some people see beauty and want to share it. Others see it and want to own it. The trick is knowing which one you are before the water tells you." When he passed me his coffee thermos, I realized something. I'd spent half a year fighting for land. But what I really reclaimed was dignity. Mine, his. Everyone who's ever been told they don't belong. Now, every year on the anniversary of the purchase, we host the Lake Legacy Festival. It's free to the community. Barbecue, live music, fishing lessons for kids. We raise funds for wildlife conservation and scholarships for local students. The same neighbors who once signed Karen's petitions now donate their time. And every year, when the sun dips low and the sky turns gold over the water, I think about how something ugly birthed something beautiful. A few weeks ago, a family from Willowbrook stopped by. They wanted to swim. I recognized one of them, Karen's old vice president, the one who used to glare at me every morning. She looked nervous. "We'd like to buy 4 permits, she said quietly. "We heard it's cleaner here than anywhere else." I smiled, handed her the tickets and said, "Welcome back." When they left that afternoon, they waved. For the first time, it felt like the feud was truly over. Now every morning I still walk that gravel path with my coffee. The fence is gone. The signs stand firm. The lake mirrors the sky, calm and endless. Sometimes, when the light hits just right, I can almost see Grandpa Joe's reflection beside mine, smiling. People ask if it feels strange owning something that once caused so much pain. I tell them no, it feels like closure. It feels like justice. It feels like the lake finally belongs to people who understand what it means to care for it. And whenever I hear the loons cry across the water, I think back to that first day Karen showed up on my dock. Heels clicking, voice sharp, talking about liability. I grin every time. Because the only thing at risk here now is her pride, and that's long gone. Sometimes, revenge doesn't need shouting or lawsuits. Sometimes it just needs patience, a few good people, and a lake that remembers who truly loves it. So if you ever find yourself up against someone trying to take what's yours, remember this story. Because every fence can come down, every bully can drown in their own arrogance, and every quiet person has their breaking point. And if that person happens to own the lake when it happens, well, that's just poetic justice. What would you do if your HOA tried to steal your family's lake? Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Bonus points if you've dealt with HOA drama, because out here at Pine Ridge, we've got plenty of room. And for the right price, even Karen could come for a swim.